All right, folks, we are back for Raising the WitchBorn episode 8. So again, we weren't initially going to do another episode on the basics, but after talking with the folks over at Discover Games and a couple of other players online on the Talk WitchBorn Facebook page, there's been a lot of people that have been asking some questions about how healing works. So as usual, Corey is joining us today. Corey, how you doing over there, man?
Oh, doing great. Ready to heal.
Awesome. So keep in mind, folks, this is not going to be an hour-long episode. This episode is maybe going to be 15, 20 minutes. So it's really talking about healing and the consequences of injury in the game. So, Corey, let's talk about that a little bit. I know we were just saying ahead of time about the brutality of the game.
Yeah, it's intentional, right? I mean, if you don't prepare your warriors, they're going to be hacked up. They're going to be missing eyes, limbs, other things, or dead and become witchborn. So healing's something you got to prepare for. It's not something that happens last minute, or for most part, most of it doesn't happen even after the game. It happens live. So
right. So let's talk about that a little bit. Like, obviously, we've discussed that there's different ways to have a model removed from the game. The most common being a knockout or a rout. So with a knockout, you go down, you're removed from the table, but typically all it means you got thumped on the skull, and 9 times out of 10, nothing really bad happens outside of the fact that you were just taken out of action. Kind of similar to most other miniatures games out there. You just remove the model from the field.
Yeah. The good news with the knockout is you come back next game ready and raring to go. Nothing permanent, nothing lingering.
Maybe a little embarrassed, but nothing. Yeah, nothing over the top. Where you start moving down from there. So next we have is it maim or war wound? I think it's maim.
Maimed is the next one that's not, and there's a wide variety of what can happen, but this is the ones where you're getting maybe your eye taken out, or your crippling limp, or an arm lopped off or something like that. It's disfiguring. There's one good maim in the deck, and that one will give you a really horrific scar that gives you the fearsome trait. So,
which is hilarious you mentioned that, because I have actually gotten that one on 2 models already. So
yeah, you don't mind that one so much.
No, it's great. It's a skill I don't have to learn.
But it still takes you out of the game.
Yes.
And it prevents you from doing anything after the game because you're recovering. So if you've got some of those great post-game skills, you're just out.
Yeah, you're licking your wounds and calling it a day. And then there, of course, is the war wound, which is usually really nasty and involves some serious consequences to the model that it happened to.
Yeah, you're going to lose 1 to 2 points permanently to an ability score, which is really bad. And if it drops your ability score to 0 or lower, you're dead.
Right.
You're going to become witchborn. Now, you do have the benefit, we're going to talk about the bind wound skill. You do have the benefit of trying to bind that wound by the end of the game in the aftermath to save yourself from dying. But so you've got that Orc Reaver with a 1 psyche, he's more vulnerable to a war wound than
right.
a genius with like a 4 psyche, or at least 3 score, 3 across the board on all ability scores. So got to be prepared.
Right, because some of them as well are psychological. Like, actually, it's funny you mentioned that, because one of the war wounds that actually happened this last time that we played at Discover Games was the Berserker suffered a psychological war wound to where he was now completely terrified of melee combat.
And he's not allowed to.
And he can't use ranged weapons. So it's like, and of course, in the WitchBorn, you can't just like abandon that guy to the side of the road and or sell him and then get the money back to get another, in this case, Berserker. You still have to keep him in your war band. So about the only thing,
figure out a way to fix that.
Right, you have to figure out a way to fix that. So effectively, if you don't know the different aspects of healing, the only thing you could do is really use that person to just run out and get discovery markers and hope for the best. And maybe eventually die. So that's really your your end goal with something like that, which sounds nasty. However, the reason why we're doing this episode is to cover some of the ways that you could help prevent those permanent injuries. So I guess the first thing to start with on this is the skills. Now, the one that is essential to every war clan when it comes time to getting rid of something that you have is the bind wounds.
Yeah. I always tell people, get 3 guys with bind wounds at least. And nobody listens, but at least I'm throwing out that advice.
Right.
Basically, to use bind wounds, it's the one skill that you can do after the fact. You're going to see on that app, it's going to say, heal this now or suffer this effect. Bind wounds lets you break that rule and do it in the aftermath after the game. But your guy has to, with bind wounds, has to make it through the game healthy. He can't be wounded and heal himself or anybody else. So you definitely want to, that's why you need multiple guys with bind wounds. And it will remove any war wound or maimed or even a KO effect that you don't like from that game that it happened in. It won't fix something that happened 3 weeks ago or, in the future. It's that game and that game only, and your guy is fine. So it's kind of like the one thing you can't live without, unless you're an elf, and we'll talk about elves in a bit. They heal differently, and bind wounds doesn't work on an elf.
Right. So the other thing to keep in mind with that as well is that typically, going back to what we were saying, is that typically with the bind wounds, it's the one game breaker, because most of the effects when you go through the app for your injury results is heal this now, which means have something on your model that it eats before it goes down or drinks before it goes down that prevents the negative effects. They're still removed from the game, so that's one of the other key things to keep in mind. They are still removed from the game. They're still counted as whatever that injury result was, but they're no longer an active model in the game. They just don't suffer the negatives. The other thing to keep in mind with bind wounds, because it does sound so important, is that it is a basic skill. So anybody, any model of any faction can take bind wounds.
Yeah, and it's really important. And if you've got mounts, let's say you've spent all that money on a cave bear, if your dwarf is horribly maimed, but let's back up. Let's say you're riding your cave bear rolls an oops on that slash attack. Not only is your rider possibly hurt, your cave bear is hurt as well, and you need a way to heal that as well. So you got to think about that with your mounts, because any kind of trample attack that fails or a slash attack that fails, they need bind wounds as well.
Right. Otherwise,
they're just dead. If you can't survive a maim with a horse with a broken leg, you kill it. It's just gone.
Right. You count it as removed from the roster altogether. Time to buy a new one. Which you can't do that with your war clan. You can do that with your mounts. You can't do that with your war clan. So that's a good thing to mention. So as far as it goes, there's a couple other skills that help with the healing process, but the way that they help is it's not like the all-encompassing bind wounds. I can do this after a game and help. These have to, they do things in certain ways to allow people to either get gear that allows for that. I'm going down. I remove this from my sheet and I'm out of the game, but I'm okay. Or they help kind of redistribute the wound chart. So like, for example, for most of the dwarves, the trait vigor.
Yeah, that one's really tough to get. Your dragon hunter starts with it. And really all that does is it protects you from that one thing that not even bind wounds can protect you from. It lets you redraw a kill.
Right.
And so you're going to want your rune forge to figure out how to get vigor runes put on all your armor so that when that kill result comes up, you can go vigor. I've had people scream vigor. They're like so so happy that they've got it when that kill comes up on their hero that they've played for 30 games and he's going to die. Yeah,
Right.
I've also seen that redraw be a kill again, and all that excitement goes away. But at least you have that really good chance that it's going to be something milder.
Right. So, and then past that, there's Plant Singer, which is an elf skill.
And that's a great skill. I mean, every elf should have several plant singers. And basically, it gives you about a 50-50 chance to make a Mauve Hypernicum. And what Mauve Hypernicum does is if you've got it in your possession and you get wounded, instead of taking one full game, missing one full game to heal, you're automatically healed. But
Right.
that's one you have to have in your possession. And it's not 100% shot when you use your plant singer that you're going to be able to make a dose every game. But again, it's something you're going to need.
Where in a case like that, kind of going back to the elves, having multiple plant singers helps.
It does. And once you've got Mauve Hypernicum and every one of your warriors' gear slots, they make so much great stuff that from Evening Primrose that gives you, rerolls to Waybread that lets you sprint, et cetera, you want to have plant singers.
Yes. So it definitely makes sense on that form. So Plant Singer is a great one on that. Now, you did say you wanted to mention something real quick about the elves, and that's the way that they suffer the damage effects.
Yeah, they're not mortal, so they actually, when they come to our world or into perdition, they create their own body. And so whether they get an arm lopped off or eye gouged out or whatever horrible happens to them, as long as it's not a kill, they can heal any wound by missing one game.
Right.
And the Mauve Hypernicum that we just talked about was the way to get around that, because it gets kind of unwieldy for you at some point if you're walking into games with only 4 or 5 models, because your guy got hurt a bunch of guys got hurt last game. So you want to always keep a lot of healing available, even if you are a elf team and not
right.
Warlock.
Cool. And then of course there's Herbal Lore and Self-Control for skills.
Yep. Herbal Lore and Lay on Hands are kind of the biggies for in-game healing. Herbal Lore is for the Norn. And basically you've got a model, he can be up to basically how far he can move in a turn. So let's say he's a long strider who moves at 8. He can move his 8 and up to 2 pushes to get to his buddy's aid and administer the Herbal Lore, and that will cure a bad knockout, a maimed, or a war wound result. It won't do a kill. Almost nothing does a kill. And Lay on Hands is the same thing. That's a paladin skill, lets you interrupt, and Power of Equinar be with you, and you are healed.
Right. So then there's Self-Control.
Self-Control is a lot like Vigor for the dwarves. This one's for the guild. The real difference here is it's kind of like having the Die Hard skill as well. So let's say I'm injured or I sprint or do something in the game that would normally give me a condition marker, and so I don't strike last because I have self-control. My mental powers and my ki are powerful enough to overcome the needs of my body, and I can just react normally. So where that comes in huge, my guild warrior is stunned. Normally I have to wait till last strike, and everybody's going to get a shot to try and finish me off before I get my turn. All I have to do is when the marshal pulls a chit of my guild color, let's say I'm yellow, he pulls that, and I go, I want to go now. I take the stun down to staggered. I'm almost healed, so much harder for them to wound me.
Right. So, which makes sense. And then you get to activate normally.
Yeah. And so a lot of the gear that we're going to talk about is the same sort of stuff. It's it's delaying that inevitable wound, right? You've got that staggered to stunned to wounded kind of stepping stones of how guys get hurt. And you want to keep it as far away from wounded as you can at all times.
Yes. So I guess we could start going down the gear a little bit. Now, folks, we don't want to go into like hyper detail on the gear because you're going to see it in your War Clan books, and a lot of this is there listed in those. So you could always read on them there. But these are things that are going to help keep you alive and mitigate. So, like for example, Dragon's Blood.
Yep. Dragon Blood and Elixir of Vigor, those are the biggies. Those are, when it says heal this now, have one of those in your gear, and that will erase the effects of any wound except for a kill. And you still get taken off the board for being unconscious, but nothing bad, nothing lingering is happening to you.
Right. And then, of course, there's the Jennifer Berry.
Yep. So the Jennifer Berry, the Heart's Horn, let's see, and the Dryad Draught are all kind of, hey, I don't want to be wounded. So Tim stuns my guy. I say, I'm going to use my Jennifer Berry. I cross it off my list. Now I go from stunned to staggered. Same thing with Heart's Horn. Same thing with the Dryad Draught. It's just they're available to different war clans, and they all do very similar things.
Right. And then there's Tali's Poultice.
That one is, I forgot to mention, that one is, I don't know how deep we want to get into this, but game mechanics. Orcs were getting slaughtered. And the problem is they are in melee a lot more, and they were getting wounds worse than anybody else. And
right, because they could easily be ganged up on when they get stuck in.
Yeah. And so we gave them Tali's Poultice, and that's the one item of gear that works a lot like a Bind Wounds. That can cure anything but that kill post-game, and it's just a magically imbued bandage that you put on whatever, and your arm grows back or whatever. But it always leaves a horrendous scar. And so after you've used Tali's Poultice 3 times, your guy becomes gruesome because he's just a mess of scars and wounds and restone on body parts. And
he's a walking scab.
Yeah, he is disgusting looking.
Right.
And gruesome is not an all bad thing. So it's going to give you rancor. People are going to want to kill you even more and get the double points. But they're a little bit intimidated by you because you're so creepy looking. So
right.
They don't fight as well against you.
Right. And then of course there's the healthy draft, which everybody has access to. It is, I believe it's a rare 3.
Yeah. And some war clans, it's not even rare at all. So
oh wow, okay.
So there is no excuse if it's not rare to not have some of these on your key guys. Tim's gonna roll an injury on me. I just say, I'm taking my healthy draught now. And if he does wound me, the result can only be one of 2 things, a KO or a kill. Healthy draught won't do anything for a kill, but if I get a maimed or a war wound, the marshal keeps drawing until a new knockout comes up.
Or kill. Hopefully you hope for the knockout.
Yeah. Yeah. And the little unseen trick of that is, let's say that first one is wound. The marshal starts flipping through the deck. If he comes up with a kill before he gets the knockout, you get to ignore that. Once you've got that war wound, that was your result. And until he draws a KO, none of the other ones count. So people who really are into the math of the game, there's only 3 kills in the whole deck. So if you can get a kill out that way, everybody's happy.
Right, because it has to show up as a maim or a war wound first, and then you keep going until the KO.
Yep.
So it's always a good way to do it. So then, of course, the last piece of gear is the Wotan's Horn.
Yeah, and that one's just a great one to help your Norn war clan. If you're playing Norn, please get lots of Wotan's Horn. You can only blow it once. per guy per game, but everybody in a 12 pace radius gets one step healthier on the injury chart. So if they're stunned, they go to staggered. If they're staggered, they go to full health. And so you don't want to miss out on that opportunity. Yeah, you hate wasting a turn, but if you can heal 2 or 3 guys at once, do it.
Yeah, very true. All right, so then folks, that's pretty much the skills and the gear that you need to keep in mind. Again, bind wounds is the big one. The healthy draught, if you can get it, definitely get it. It's a very, very good one to get. Obviously, anything that's war clan specific are always good for that. But keep in mind that, like, if you don't have it on you and you get a maim or a war wound outside of that bind wounds, you're stuck for the most part. You're going to suffer whatever the consequences are of that wound.
Yeah.
So the only other thing to cover is there are really 5 spells total right now that can actually do something to help mitigate the results of a wound. So that's Feign Death, Spark of Life, Reborn, Vano's Touch, and Restore.
Yeah, and the War Mage Diary should very soon be coming out with an update. And Spark of Life and Bonus Touch got even more powerful. And so they're both going to be second magnitude spells, so you're not going to be able to get them right away. You're going to have to be at least second level to cast these spells. But Bonus Touch is that, heal a stun or a staggered right away during the game. If your guy is wounded and being feasted on by WitchBorn, it'll allow you to take him off the board and instantly cure that maimed or war wound result. Still not going to help you with a kill. And Spark of Life doesn't really help with the wounds so much, but it does. It's a orc spell that allows them to heal during battle, which is really important. And it's going to allow you got your orcs facing those nasty elves, and the elves put some of your best orcs to sleep because they're dumb, like your Reaver. From a distance, from up to long range, you can give him a little shock, and he'll go from unconscious to fully awake.
Yeah.
So, great one to have. The Feign Death is a death spell, and what that does is it allows your guy to pretty much ignore the first wound that he takes during the game. So, and then he pops back up late the next round and fully healthy. Nothing will protect him from that second.
Yeah, at that point, you better have some gear.
Yeah, but it's one of those nice little spells. If you can, it only does one guy, and but it's a great one if you can get off. And then the 2 biggies, Restore is a must-have if you have access to Divine Magic. That's your Paladin, Druid, Hammer Adur. All get that easily. Orcs can get it, and Guild can get it as well if they spend a skill to get it. But what Restore does is kind of like Bind Wounds, but it allows you to do it games later. Like 5 games ago, my guy got a horrible leg wound, and now he's got the Shamble trait, or he's an oaf because he had some brain damage or whatever. Restore allows you to do it after the fact. It's a psyche feat, so it's not automatic, but you just got to make sure that your mage doesn't get wounded during the game. He has to be healthy in the aftermath to cast it.
Right. When all else fails, kill the mage. But yeah, and then of course there's Reborn.
Yeah, that's the nearly impossible spell to get. You've got to be at least 8th level and make a roll. Every time you try and learn that spell, you got to roll a 6 on a 6-sided dice. So it takes people a long time to get it. But that one does give you a chance to bring mortal warriors back from death. So it's a great one to have.
Right. So one of the other things to mention as well, especially if you are a new player and you are joining up with some people that are experienced, and this is just a real quick side note, in the campaign rules is the incentive table, which allows you to start with some of these equipments. So that way you don't just like go running in there, because at this point people are far more efficient at combat and just get dropped you at least have a fighting chance.
Yeah, if you jump to page 74 of the campaign rule book, under health, there's 4 options there that you can pick before a game. And even if you're brand new war clans, if you're playing an elf or a Norn, they're probably not starting at 125. They're probably a little bit higher because the Norn has a pure blood or the elf has some kind of fey that jack their war clan value up. So even if you've only got 10 points to spend, like a 10-point difference between war clan values, get the Elixir of Vigor for mortals or get the Maw of Hypernicum for an elf.
Right.
And give it to your favorite guy, your most expensive guy, because that one's portable. You don't have to drink it before the game. You can use it when you want. So if you make it through the game healthy, you've got a bonus. If you need it, you got it.
Right. It's always it's like a fire extinguisher. You always you always want it when you need it, and never the other way around. You're never looking for it when you really need it. So it's one of those things where you want to make sure that you always got it on you, because boy, when you need it, you need it. I've had it in a couple of occasions in games where it's like, oh, I am so glad that I spent the extra 5 gold just for this Jennifer berry, just giving it to people. When people are like, well, that was an extra weapon. What are you doing? Or that was towards something else. I'm like, yep, but guess what? I'm not dead.
Yeah, I've got it. And the incentives table is nice. I mean, if you have a 100-point difference between you and your opponent and you're new, you probably shouldn't be playing them. But even that one divine touch, even if one warrior on your war clan dies in that game, you can bring them back to life. So
right. Awesome. So that pretty much covers everything for healing. Again, the game is designed to be brutal. So you are going to lose people. They are going to get injured, but do everything that you can to make sure that you mitigate that as much as possible.
Be a Boy Scout and be prepared.
Exactly. All right, folks, that's going to wrap up this final episode of the basics section of Raising the Witchborn, and we will see you next time.